Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another Instant Deck Tech. Today we're heading to Modern for a new take on a very old archetype. This is a Storm deck, but instead of being the typical blue-red Storm, this is a Mono-Red Bedlam Reveler Storm deck. Recently took someone by the name of Modern Max to several top 4 finishes in Magic League trials, so congrats to Modern Max on their finish with the deck. A quick reminder before we break it all down: if you enjoy this deck and want to see it made into videos, take a minute, click the like button, the subscribe button, leave a comment, anything you can do to support your deck, because whichever deck is most popular gets a shot at being made into videos next week. So, Mono-Red Bedlam Storm is pretty much a grape shot deck. I would say in a huge percentage of games, the way you're going to actually win is by casting 15, 20 spells in the same turn, and then casting a grape shot. One in a red deals a damage to a creature or player, but has Storm, so you get to copy it for each spell that was cast before it during the turn. So if you can cast 15, 20 spells, you can just one-shot your opponent with Grape Shot. So that's what this deck is focused on, building up a Storm count large enough that it can win with Grape Shot. Pyromancer's Ascension has popped up in several decks recently. We've seen it mostly in these value, Thing in the Ice, Lightning Helix type decks. That's not how this deck is using Pyromancer's Ascension. Pyromancer's Ascension is in the deck to support the Grape Shot plan, to double up card draw spells and rituals, to help you generate that huge Storm count and win with the one big turn. There is, I guess, a chance that you can win with Lightning Bolts. You don't have much burn in the deck, but you do have 4 bolts, so in theory, you could get an active Pyromancer's Ascension, resolve 3 or 4 copies of Lightning Bolt, and win that way, but really, it's in the deck to make the Grape Shot Storm plan work. So outside of these finishers, the deck has a bunch of rituals, so if you're trying to cast 20 spells in the same turn, one thing you need is a lot of mana. Casting 20 spells is pretty expensive, so Desperate Ritual, Pyretic Ritual, essentially the same card, just +1 mana essentially. You spend 2 to cast it, you end up with 3 mana. If you have an active Pyromancer's Ascension, you spend 2 mana, end up with 6 mana. So these cards facilitate your ability to cast a bunch of spells in the same turn by giving you the mana to do it. And then the second trick is to keep cycling through your deck and not fizzle out, because you got to keep drawing more cards. You're never going to have 20 spells in your hand. You're going to need to be able to draw cards as you're going through this Storm process. Manamorphose is free. It costs 2 mana, but you get 2 mana back, and it draws you a card. So it's free as far as cards are concerned, and free as far as mana is concerned. Gitaxian Probe is the same way. It costs you 2 life, but you don't really care if you're going to win on your big Storm turn anyway. Doesn't cost you a card, you get the card back. So these are just +1 Storm count, essentially, for no cards and no mana. That's why they're in the deck. Then there's some ways to cycle through the deck, keep drawing cards that do actually cost you some amount of mana. Faithful Suiting, Magmatic Insight. These are ways you can draw a couple extra cards. You have to discard cards in the process, but it helps you get through pockets of lands. One way a Storm deck can fizzle is a lot of the times when you go off with Storm, you don't necessarily have the win in your hand. You're trusting that with all your card draw, with all your rituals, with your Pyromancer's Ascension, you're going to draw into what you need. You're going to draw into your Grape Shots, draw into more card draw. Faithless Looting and Magmatic Insight are just great ways to filter through your deck. Tormenting Voice is kind of the same thing, a little bit more expensive, and then Act on Impulse gives you access to 3 cards for 3 mana. Yes, you got to cast them all in the same turn, but if you're trying to win on a big Storm turn, you don't really care. You were planning on casting them during that turn anyway. So these cards make sure that you have enough cards in your hand to get a big enough Storm count to win with Grape Shot. And then the deck has Bedlam Reveler, which is pretty much a free roll in this deck. It is about as good as you can get. You have so many spells, and you're casting so many spells that as you're storming off and casting rituals and card draw spells, eventually you're going to find a Bedlam Reveler, cast it for 2 mana, get rid of whatever stuff is left over in your hand, the lands that have built up that you can't cast anyway, can't play anyway, and then you draw 3 new cards, get to keep the Storm chain going. It's also like the backup plan for winning the game. You could have a Bedlam Reveler, attack with it, and then just cast all these rituals and Manamorphoses and generate a huge amount of prowess and win like that. But really, it's draw 3 for 2 mana is the reason that the deck's playing it. And then kind of the thing that makes the plan of casting 20 spells in a turn practical is Past in Flames. So you cast a 8 spells, 10 spells, your rituals, you get some mana floating, your card draw spells, then you just cast a Past in Flame, which gives every instant and sorcery in your graveyard flashback, then you get to do the whole thing again. So with a Past in Flame, instead of having to cast 20 spells from your hand in the same turn, you can cast 10 spells from your hand, cast a Past in Flames, and then cast the same 10 spells from your graveyard to get that 20 storm count that you need to win with your Grape Shot. As far as the mana base, all mountains in a single Ghost Quarter. In the sideboard, we got Empty the Warrens. If your opponent is on, for example, the Leyline of Sanctity plan, you're not going to be able to win with Grape Shot, but no one really plays Leyline main deck, so if you think your opponent's going to bring in Leyline, to counter that, you bring in Empty the Warrens. So instead of winning with a ton of damage to the face, you just do the same thing, storm off, make a ton of goblins. Next turn, you untap, attack with all these goblins. You probably have 20, 30, 1/1 goblin tokens and win the game that way. Kozilek's Return and Anger of the Gods just help slow the opponent down. Shatterer Storm and Shattering Spree are there for against Affinity. And then Graftaker's Cage helps against graveyard decks. Guttural Response fights through counter magic and Blood Moons. One of the advantages of being mono-red is you get to Blood Moon your opponent to slow them down even more. And that is Mono-Red Bedlam Storm for Modern. Anyway, that's been our Instant Deck Tech for today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon.